work with Cardone Digital Ventures. If you already saw Gary Cardone speaking earlier today, which I thought was fantastic with his background in the energy industry. With me is Michael Terpin, all the way at the end, who is a Bitcoin digital asset OG, as well as Jen Stiles, who I'm very excited to have. So let me just set the stage, because what I really want everybody to kind of get a background for is how things have changed. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's perfect that both of you are up here, because both of you have been in this space for quite some time. And 2010 and 2015 looked entirely different than today does, not just in adoption, but as we all know now, the political landscape. So, Michael, I'll start with you if you want to maybe just give a quick intro, but then I want to get right to it and say, what's different now?
Testing, here we go. So I'm Michael Terpin. I've been in the crypto world since 2012, got really heavy involved in early 2013, started BitAngel, started the Coin Agenda conferences now called Tokenize. We have Puerto Rico Blockchain Week coming up in December. And I guess I'm listed differently on the panel than I am on the slide here. Those are two portfolio companies, but my main thing is I've had a Transform Ventures, which is a blockchain incubator and investment firm. And I also have a book called Bitcoin Supercycle coming out in 2 weeks. And so I'm going to be at the Miami Book Fair and the Benzinga Conference and a few other things. And you can just look up Bitcoin Supercycle. It's on pre-order now. So that's me. And a plug. What's different? Boy, everything. I'd say that when I first got into Bitcoin, the total market cap was just a few million. And now it's like 1.5 trillion. And, one reason I wrote the book was because traditional investors, real estate investors, startup investors, I told them about Bitcoin when it was $60. I told them when it was $600. I told them it was $6,000. They always had the same answer. Oh, let me ask my broker. And then never bought it. Or they said, oh, okay, I heard it was a scam. Okay, I heard it. And so a little bit less and less of that these days. Now it's like, well, it's so hard to set up an account on Coinbase. I think one thing good about Trump winning is it'll be easier to set up an account on Coinbase. And of course now you'll be able to, since January, you've been able to go and just click on your Charles Schwab and buy an ETF, and that does at least give you exposure for Bitcoin. You just can't withdraw it. It's always better to have your own keys. But I think that we are right now entering the second phase of every cycle. You have 4 phases. You have the halving. That's what I call Bitcoin spring. It's the day of the halving. It's when the seed of the new cycle happens. And then the day you pass the all-time high of the prior cycle, it takes off like a rocket ship. That happened on election day. We passed the all-time high from last cycle. When it passed 20,000 4 years ago, it was 60,000 within 4 months. When it passed the prior high 4 years before that, which was a mere $1,200, it was 20,000 by the end of the year. And when it passed $30 after the first halving, it was 1,200 within a few months. And so I'm projecting we should be over 150 in 4 or 5 months.
Well, and that segues perfectly into a question I have for you, Jen, which would love, one, for you to give your brief background, but then 2, the question I'll ask you is, right before we were up on stage, we were talking about the election and some of the strategies around what we're going to be doing going forward. And you mentioned it's just good to know, right?
Yes.
So, given your media expertise too, maybe you can touch on that.
Sure. I started my career at CNN. I was a journalist for 9 years, covered 9/11, war in Iraq, Hurricane Katrina, presidential election in 2000, 2004. And then I started a company in Miami, New York, and LA, and we launched WeWork. And I ended up going in-house to WeWork. I was a global head of consumer communications and marketing. And that's how I got involved in crypto, because Coinbase was my WeWork member. So back in 2015, 2016, my job was to really communicate and educate, learn about our WeWork members, and several early stage crypto companies were WeWork members. And it was a kind of an incubation to really onboard normies into crypto early on, myself included. But Sam and I were talking earlier, and I think there's a level of relief that this election is over, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. I have a company called Styles Ventures. I invest and advise in early stage companies through marketing and communications, and yeah, it's Michael and I, we were at Bitcoin Nashville, and obviously the Propy team, I've known them for a while. I'm an LP in Acti Ventures, Acti Global, sitting in for Amanda Terry today, and very happy to be here.
As a political strategist, my goal was, how do I figure out what's going to happen post-election? Whether it was Kamala Harris winning, I was thinking, okay, what does it look like if we still have Gary Gensler in charge of the SEC? But then with Trump winning, I don't think he will still be head of the SEC. But to that point, I think that was one of the main drivers behind the election was the Bitcoin community. And Michael and I were talking earlier about, and it was actually, it was very fun because he had been watching or involved in the elections, and we went through 2000 was, what'd you say, the first
time that both candidates had a homepage.
Yes, and we went 2004, 2008, and how this election, regardless of who won, one of the decisive factors was Bitcoin, right? So, Michael, do you want to touch on, when you're talking about lessons from a crypto pioneer and how the foundations have changed, who would have imagined 2024, maybe you would have imagined, but that Bitcoin would have been such a huge part in society to the point where a presidential election in the most powerful country on earth is affected by this industry?
I've been saying it for years how big it's going to be in terms of the global economy. And, money talks and BS walks, right? So this reminds me, I've seen this movie before. This reminds me of the early days of the internet. I was on a panel like this. I can't remember the year now, but it was early days of the internet. And I was laughed at when I suggested that Google could go and, one day have a Super Bowl. And it was like, oh, come on. They're never going to be able to do that because, first of all, they can't even get bigger than the cable networks. And one reason they can't is because they can't hire people. They're all going to work for the cable companies. They can't hire lobbyists. They're all precluded. They're bigger than all the cable companies combined now, right? And so people really underestimated the size of the internet. They underestimated the size of social media, which is now, a couple of the biggest companies in the world. They've certainly way underestimated how big crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin in particular are going to be. We're at $2.5 trillion now, which is smaller than it was in the peak of 2021. And so I believe by the end of this cycle, the overall crypto industry will be somewhere between 7 and 10 trillion. And, as we go up to what I call the Bitcoin super cycle, every technology, it takes a while to get going. And then you get where you're about 8 or 10% of mass adoption, and we're just getting on the cusp of that. In the US, we're higher. Then all of a sudden it's like, your neighbor has a color TV and you don't. Your neighbor has a cell phone and you don't. Your neighbor has, you can name the technologies one right after the other. It happened with the internet. And then boom, it goes from 8 to 80%. We're now way over 80% internet adoption. And yet, 20 years ago it was kind of a rare thing for people to have internet both at home and work. And so that's really, what's at stake here. And what was the driver rather is, according to crypto.com, we're around 600, now I think almost 700 million crypto users. Interestingly enough, about a third of them have no Bitcoin. They're Dogecoin buyers, but they're still crypto, right? And it's like, 22-year-old who's got a bunch of Doge. He doesn't want to vote for somebody who says they're going to shut down Dogecoin, so this is sort of the new gold. And we're going to get, at least, if not this cycle, next cycle, to where we're getting to, within shooting distance of the value of gold. I believe by next year, the value of Bitcoin ETFs will be larger than gold ETFs. If you're a millennial or younger, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen A, I guess they're recycling now, you're not looking at putting your IRA into the stock market. You're putting it into stocks. You're not looking to put it into gold bullion bars. You're looking to put it into crypto. And so that, when you've got 50 million users in the U.S., according to Coinbase, of digital assets, I mean, that's a healthy percentage of the electorate. And, the other thing, I was shocked by the statistic, by the way. Did you know that this cycle, more corporate spending on lobbyists, I'm sorry, on PACs, et cetera, on the election, presidential election, came from crypto donors than from any other category. It was more than the big banks. It was more than pharma. 48% of all corporate donations was from crypto-related PACs and companies.
Yeah, 1 second, Jen, because I know I want to touch on the political stuff, definitely. Just one point, which I thought was interesting. Google, by the way, is now the #1 employer of lobbyists in DC. Right. So if that doesn't give you a message, just I thought that was so fascinating. Go ahead, Jen.
No, I was just going to echo what Michael was saying. Like, I remember being a kid at CNN, and the producers were laughing about the internet, about people watching television on their phone, on the internet, or on their phones, or even those scrolls that they now have. And that's the same feeling that I have about crypto. And it's like something that you feel in your gut, and you're just like, I know this is a movement. And after what happened with the election this week, it's not going anywhere. Like, it's here. Like, decentralized journalism, decentralized real estate, finance, obviously, but it's an exciting time. And my goal is to educate as many and onboard as many normal people onto this wonderful world we live in.
Tell me, Jen, how your strategy going forward is going to change now. I mean, with adoption being hit and with, I think, a heavily Bitcoin-focused political landscape, like, I know we're talking about lessons to learn, but what lesson have you learned to then say, hey, I'm going to put this into action now?
I think you have to be sensitive right now. Things are very heightened. I do think being sensitive to a lot of your friends that are not in crypto, you don't want to be pushing it on them, because then you may come across a bit aggressive. So honestly, the NFT boom, like getting people on through digital assets, through art, real estate. I think that there's a lot that you can do there. I mean, I know we laughed about Dogecoin, but people aren't afraid to buy it. And they're
Dogecoin was up 30% yesterday.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, I'm an LP in a few funds, and I was talking to the chief investment officer yesterday, and he said, "So I just put 100-to-1 leverage on buying Dogecoin." He goes, "Not for the fund, just for my personal." And I remember hanging up, and I was thinking, I should have told him to put a few thousand for the fund too. Again, 100x leverage when it went up 30% one day. And that was a bet on Trump, because we knew that if Trump won, not only would Bitcoin go up, but Doge would go up more, because Elon now is talking about running, and I'm sure they're not going to create a new cabinet level, but it's just kind of a meme. But he said, I want to run the Department of, what was it?
Department of Government Efficiency.
That's right.
Which the acronym for that is Doge.
So he's going to run Doge.
But I don't think it's that far off. Like, I really don't think I mean, it sounds silly, but who knows what'll happen.
I mean, I think Elon, Vivek, I know Vance is personally invested in it, and then with RFK Jr., it may be the most pro-Web3,
Yes.
pro-Bitcoin cabinet we've ever had. And to your point, Michael, this election, you saw super PACs like Fairshake, which has had money from Coinbase, pour over $100 million into very strategic Senate races. One of them was Adam Schiff out in California. They helped the Democratic California Adam Schiff, just to show you that it's bipartisan, take out someone who was running against him. I believe it was, no, not Amy Klobuchar, it was someone else who was very prominent, who was anti-crypto. And then they poured a lot of money into Montana and Pennsylvania. So regardless of party affiliation, a lot of these super PACs have done an incredibly good job making sure that, what was the number from Coinbase? Was it 250 people in Congress now are pro-crypto? About 230?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you would have told me that in 2020,
That's almost half, right? It's 538.
it's great.
Yeah.
Yes. If you would have told me that in 2020, I would have been like, I think we're going to have some. I don't know if it'll be that much. But the accelerated rate in which we've seen adoption just on the technical and cultural level, I think is incredible. So what are you excited for in the future now, just besides adoption? I mean, do you see an easy path where America becomes a leader and we're finally opening up the market? I'll start with you, Michael, and then Jim.
Well, that's, I mean, we were both in Nashville for David Bailey, who's a good friend of mine going back to 2013. He bought Bitcoin magazine, the print magazine, because he actually comes from a print magazine family. And he, went online with it, and then really started the conferences. And when he started the Bitcoin conference, It started slowly, but 2021, when he had it in Miami, and they were the first conference to come out after the pandemic, it was just total FOMO, and they had like 35,000 people show up. That was kind of really the height of the bubble because, again, there's 4-year cycles to crypto, and you have to be wary of two things. Number one, don't be afraid to buy at the bottom. If you bought the day after FTX, when Jim Cramer's on TV saying, it's not too late to sell all your Bitcoin, it's a bad investment, get out. Do the opposite. I mean, you're supposed to buy low and sell high in other assets. Bitcoin is that way and then some. And literally, you had about a 3 or 4 month period. Didn't have to buy the day, but you could have seen if it went even lower, which it didn't. Even when Genesis Mining went out of business, it didn't drop because there was nobody left to sell. All the weekends, everybody who was bought high and sold low, they were out. That's happened every 4 years, and so you buy at the end of what I call Bitcoin autumn, Bitcoin fall, so the prices fall. Every third year of the cycle has been when prices drop. The only years in the entire history of Bitcoin that you could have lost money between January 1st and December 31st were 2014, 2018, 2022, and you're probably going to lose money in 2026 because we're going to have a hell of a bull market between now and the end of 25. And that's when retail is going to buy in. They're going to like, wow, Bitcoin just went to $250,000. I heard it's going to $1 million. I better go and buy a tenth of one. And, meanwhile, guys like me are selling knowing I can buy back a year later. Literally the last 2 times you could have bought on the day of the high or pretty close to it and then sold 12 months later and got in at like a fraction of the cost. I mean, we've had 85% drops, 83% drops. This last time was a 75% drop. And I think the next time will probably be a 65% drop. And since you know these things, I give a step-by-step in my book, but it's actually much better than just holding. Not a bad strategy, as James Hafted mentioned on an earlier panel. If you bought 1,000 Bitcoin in 2012 for $12, it's worth $75 million today. On the other hand, if you had sort of just bought once and sold once every 4 years within about 20% of the top, 20% of the bottom, you'd have $5 billion today.
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, fun fact, when I had a marketing agency, we worked with a company called Tiger Direct, and we could have got paid in $20,000 Bitcoin or cash, and we took cash. So that was a big mistake. But what I'm most excited about is really like real use cases. Like, we're so early on, and then what gets me excited is just watching it come to life. And so you'll be able to not only buy clothes or like what Propy's doing with real estate, for example. I mean, I own real estate. I would love to see that on chain and watch like who lived in my place before and really like have that real use case.
Well, I bought my Miami penthouse in 2021 at the top of the market, half in Bitcoin and half in a loan based on Bitcoin, which I will pay back at the end of this cycle. And so
Wow.
I think there's more. First of all, if you're selling a home, accept Bitcoin, because it'll bring out some people who will prefer to pay in Bitcoin, particularly as we get further in the cycle. And also, we're starting to see a wave. There's already companies like Salt Lending, which I helped launch years ago, that have loans where you can go and just take out cash and from your Bitcoin and then pay it back. Later, they're even coming out now with something that you can't be liquidated, because what they have is they know that Bitcoin's going to only go so low, so they have people backing up your position. And the other thing is I'm waiting for someone to come up with a hybrid loan, and I know a few people talked about it, where you literally can go in and have not just your Bitcoin, but your home's collateral to make sure you don't get liquidated.
I think that's what I'm really excited about.
Me too.
I'm terrible at timing the market. I always tell all my friends I'm the worst trader. When I decide to sell, you should probably buy. Like, I'm that type of guy, and that's why I dollar cost average, and I don't sell, just because I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm really bad at. But to your statement, I'm very excited for when I can just start using my Bitcoin as true collateral.
Yes.
For everything. And I've talked to bankers all over the world, and they've said this might be the best asset for collateral that we've ever seen. To the point, and who knows when this will happen, maybe sooner than I think, where banks are seeking out people to use their Bitcoin and paying you to use your Bitcoin as collateral. How far off do you think we are from that?
Well, with Trump being elected, not far.
I think it'll go fast.
Yeah, because he's already said he's going to go and take all of the money that's been seized from various, criminal things like Silk Road, and it's about 200,000 bitcoins, a lot of money, and they're going to keep it as a strategic Bitcoin reserve, just like we have a strategic oil reserve, we have a strategic, gold reserve, and as other nations start doing that, and then, Michael Saylor, who is, I'm sure everybody knows who Michael Terpin is. MicroStrategies, and they've outperformed NVIDIA the last 4 years. And their strategy has been, they've got their software business. That's what gave them the cash, business intelligence software. But it's kind of flattening out. And they took their cash. 15 years ago, they invested most of it into Facebook, Amazon, and Google, and did really well with that.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden in 2020, he felt that they've kind of peaked out, which, they have gone up, but not to the extent of Bitcoin. And he looked and said, where am I going to put my nice big cash position? Because I don't want it in cash with all this money printing going on during COVID. And in August of 2020, he bought a boatload of Bitcoin for $11,000 and just got laughed at. He got people are talking about suing him for being irresponsible to corporate treasury. He's laughing all the way to the bank now. They have outperformed NVIDIA. And he's only been in Bitcoin for 4 years. And he's made billions of dollars off it. So it's not too late at $76,000.
Now, unfortunately, we are over time, but Jen, do you have any final comments?
Just have fun with it. I want people to be responsible, but also do your best on educating your friends and read. I think the more you know, the better off we'll all be.
I think that's a perfect way. Michael, any final comments?
Yeah, I tweet about it every day at Michael Terpin, Terpin, and I have a book.
Buy Michael's book.
Bitcoin Supercycle. Now I'm pre-order coming out the hardcover in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everybody.